The Todts look like this wholesome, all-American family, the type that we all imagine about the American dream. The boys are bright, they're academically gifted, they're talented musicians. Zoe, the youngest, she was known for her spark and her personality. Apparently she was a really sassy little girl who literally lit up every single room she walked into. But like in so many cases, behind that facade, darkness was building. And when the FBI begin investigating Anthony for healthcare fraud, they have no idea what they're about to uncover inside the Todt family home. Because it turns out unspeakable tragedy had already unfolded. Anthony had killed Megan, their 3 children, and even their beloved dog, Breezy. And he lived in that house with their bodies for weeks. Also, after initially confessing, Todt tried to claim that his original accounts of events were false. In fact, in the last, what can I describe it as, despicable chance at freedom, he said he was in fact covering for his wife, who he then blamed for killing the children, and then herself. This case is about Anthony Todt, who was a coward, who slaughtered his wife and his children, and then tried to pin the blame on her. Not only did he destroy his own family, but then he tried to reputationally destroy Megan's memory too, blaming her for a crime that she didn't commit. It's a final act of cruelty, isn't it? Against the very person that he should have wished to have protected and cherished most in this world. For those of you who are new to my channel, I release my crime content here twice weekly. If you like this content and you want more of it, you can get it on my Patreon and also my YouTube membership. If you are coming back here and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if you find my content interesting, why don't you give me a like? I would appreciate that massively. Let's talk about the horrendous perpetrator, Anthony John Todt. He was born on September the 29th, 1975. His parents were Robert and Loretta. When he was just 4 years of age, he experienced a very traumatic event. His mother got shot in their own home. Now, she did survive, but imagine being 4 years of age. You can have a core memory at that point just imprinted in your conscience, and no doubt that will have happened for him. Now, it turns out in July 1980, Robert, his father, was arrested. It turned out he'd actually hired someone to kill his wife. It turned out that was a former student who'd shot Loretta, and Robert had paid him a measly $800 to carry out that horrific deed. He was later actually found guilty of attempted homicide, criminal conspiracy, and criminal solicitation. He served 5 years in prison. And Robert, on reflection, said that he did kind of give up on the position as dad at that point, and that meant that Anthony was raised by his mother and stepfather. But I suppose in that situation, there's a very important lesson that Todt has learned, which is if something's in your way, well, you can always get rid of it, or at least try, just as his own father had done. And also, 5 years seems to be a very small sentence for somebody who's literally tried to orchestrate the murder of his wife. Now, in 1992, whilst Todt's attending high school in Montville, Connecticut, he meets Megan. They begin dating, and apparently they were best friends. They became super close to one another's families. This is young love, but it's young love that's committed and seems to work out really well. Megan had actually been born in New London on January the 28th, 1977. She was born to parents Albert and Gail Gula. In high school, she was a drum major. She played tennis. She loved music. She loved playing the flute and piano, and she was apparently a gifted singer. And it seems like those skills really did drip down genetically to her own children, who were also very skilled in those areas. Now, after school, Todt attended Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. He studied psychology, interestingly, and he actually had a focus during that particular university time on health psychology. He also had a minor of pre-physical therapy. He then went on to complete a master's in science in physical therapy. So he was a bright guy, he was academic, and he earned his license to practice physical therapy in 1999. Megan, she actually later attended Sacred Heart University as well. She was 2 years behind Todt, and she also studied physical therapy there. So to all intents and purposes, they're doing very well academically. They obviously have their future mapped out, and they are together. In 2000, Todt and Megan got married. Megan at times was suffering from poor health. She had Lyme disease from a young age, and she also had mitral valve prolapse. So that's basically a problem with her heart. She had murmurs and arrhythmias. So she's got physical challenges without a doubt. And of course, where Lyme disease is concerned, it can become very chronic at times. But health aside, the marriage was good overall. People said they were a great couple. So basically, they really are working together, living together, expanding their ideas about what they're going to achieve by literally opening a second clinic. And on one level, this shows just how close and connected they are. On another level, we can also imagine that at times there'll be stresses and strains. I mean, when your financial dependency is enmeshed in a business that you and your partner actually operate, that can be scary, because when it goes through challenging times, as most businesses do, it's going to affect the both of you pay packet wise. But nonetheless, it shows that they have some big dreams and big ambitions, and they're going towards that by doing this and opening the clinics and working together effectively. Now, in 2002, Megan goes through a really sad experience. Her father basically takes his own life, and having been there, I can absolutely understand that this will be a transformative moment for Megan. Bear in mind that she also has some health issues, and very often when you are highly stressed, you can get really sick. So this will have added impact to her own physical concerns, and no doubt might have exacerbated some of her problems. Then we get to 2005 and they're making some changes. They buy a condo in Florida. They actually rent that out. So again, that's another stream of income. Then on September the 26th, 2006, a happy event occurs. So Megan and Todt have their first child together, a little boy. They name him Alexander, or Alec. Now on December the 30th, 2008, they have another child, another little boy. They call him Tyler. And then after she's had these children, she stops working at the physical therapy practice, and she basically became that perfect example of a stay-at-home mum. She was just totally devoted to her children. She did carry on working as a yoga teacher, but she just wants to dedicate herself fully to the children. She homeschooled her kids. Apparently she was known to make home-cooked meals, and she was just the perfect housewife on every single level. But that will mean that her eyes are off the business. Yes, she's doing a yoga, but she's not daily working with her husband any longer. And that means that he's in control. And very often when you take your eye off the ball, you might not realize just how important your eyes were until that's done. So she's no longer looking in that direction. And I think that ultimately he takes advantage of that. Now we get to the spring of 2011, Megan actually starts to get really sick. So she'd been bitten by a bug. She actually developed a gigantic yellow-green pustule. And around that time, she also goes really sadly through a miscarriage. Then over the following year, she's got lots of trips to the hospital emergency room. She's at the cardiac critical care units, and she ends up getting diagnosed as well with tonsil cellulitis. So that means she had pustules on her tonsils, she had enlarged lymph nodes, and that literally affected her breathing. So she's really poorly, and she ends up getting drug-induced hepatitis. Now this affects her liver. Her eyes became yellow due to the liver problems, so she got jaundiced, she lost a lot of weight, and she had a really high heart rate. And then when she had flare-ups of the Lyme disease, so exacerbations, she actually suffered from really chronic pain. So at this point, she's turning to alternative medicine to try to alleviate her symptoms. But you can imagine, can't you, that at that point, she's concentrating wholly on her children and also on trying to get herself well so that she can be present in her children's lives in a full way. She's not going to be looking at Todt and the business. She's just going to be trusting that everything's okay there. Now, after Tyler had been born, the family actually hired a mother's helper to help getting Alex to school. And after Megan's health declined, the helper's hours were actually increased because she needed that support. We get to 2014, and there's a lovely event in the family. They get the dog called Breezy. He was apparently really loyal, really faithful, as our dog family always tend to be. And he was a companion to her, went everywhere with the family in general, was just absolutely adored. Now we get to July the 23rd, 2015. This is when Megan and Anthony have their third and final child. This time it's a little girl, and they name that little girl Zoe. Now it's in 2017, the family moved to Celebration in Florida. Now, Anthony can only actually be there on weekends. During the week, he still lives in Connecticut for his work because that's where it is. So again, even more so now, Megan will not be thinking about the business. She's a devoted stay-at-home mother. She's got issues with her health. She's moved to a different place and location. So she is going to spend her time focusing on the things that she's dealing with on a day-to-day basis, the kids. And he's meant to be dealing with his work and making sure that he's bringing good income in for the family. We get to September 2019 and Megan has another miscarriage, and apparently this devastated the family. So she's really been through an incredibly challenging period of time. We get to November the 21st, 2019, and another impact is going to affect the Todt's lives. And the reason for this is nothing to do with health and absolutely to do with Todt. And that is, he starts getting investigated by FBI agents. They also search his clinics. So when the FBI get involved, you know there are some serious issues at hand. So basically, it's come to their attention earlier that year in April that he had been doing things that were concerning, and they had started to investigate him ever since. Now, it's found at this point that Todt's in debt. He'd actually taken out a number of personal loans, and his business had taken out around $100,000 in loans during 1 month in 2017. Let that sink in. In 1 month, he took out $100,000 in loans, but he'd done this in lots of different places. So 20 different lenders he'd taken money from. And this means that he showed up on the radar. He'd also, it turns out, been committing medical fraud, so he's charging insurance companies for physical therapy sessions that the patients never actually had. It was actually found that he'd billed Medicaid over $20,000 for sessions that he said had taken place on Saturdays. Problem being, the clinic didn't actually open on weekends. And you understand why he'd do that, because of course, if the clinic doesn't open, it means that he's going to be able to fill sheets in because there won't have been patients there. So he can make those false claims. He couldn't do that in the week because of the hours expected in each day. But he can do that by lying about the fact that the clinic's open on a Saturday and charging these invisible people for that. Now, for one family in particular, he added 172 hours of therapy to the medical insurance bill that they actually didn't receive. And you can imagine the psychology of somebody like Todt. Oh, I'm not really stealing from people. I'm stealing from the insurance company. But commercial fraud impacts customers because bills go up when you're paying your monthly fee to insure yourself. So it is directly affecting the individuals that he's meant to be there to serve. And can you imagine knowing that the very person you've been to have these massages with, this physical therapy with, is actually defrauding you? Who can you trust? That's going to be what you're left with mentally. Now, Todt initially denied everything, and let me tell you, that's one of the things that Todt's really good at, denying everything. Now, even though initially he denied everything, eventually he had to admit to it because they had all the evidence that pointed directly in his direction. So he said at this point, yeah, okay, I admit it, I was just adding stuff to bills randomly. And bear in mind, this would have been shocking for Meghan. It was shocking for his employees, they didn't know. But for his wife, completely unaware of what he'd been doing, she had absolutely no idea of the debt that he was in. So he is keeping secrets from her. And that is very disturbing because even though every human being in a relationship won't always tell their partner everything, the big stuff is absolutely essential because otherwise it shows that there is a level of distrust in our relationship that will be escalated and amplified by their deception and your knowledge of that deception. And that is destabilizing on every level. But you can imagine for Meghan, it's even more destabilizing if she finds out that he's in massive debt because she's reliant on him to bring the money in so that she can be at home with the family. And she probably has a guilt level to that, being that she thinks to herself, well, maybe because I don't work, maybe because I'm dealing with all of these things here, he's now putting himself in a position where he's broken the law because he basically needs to provide for me. And that can be used as a gaslighting way of managing the partner. Well, if you were working, I wouldn't have needed to do this. Now, they don't arrest him, so he's still a free man, but it seems like this is the beginning of the problems really escalating and amplifying. So in December 2019, it's the 1st of December this happens, the Todt family's landlord ends up suing them for unpaid rent. On the 22nd of December, they filed an evictions summons. And the total owed for rent at the time was just over $5,132. Turns out he'd also been evicted from his business in Connecticut at this stage. So this really does paint a picture of growing financial instability and trouble for the family. Imagine being Meghan. It's harrowing when you're losing everything that you've known. And the money issues that Todt had obviously been having had just started to eventually catch up with him and come to this pivotal point. But bear in mind, she probably wasn't even aware until this point. So even though he is in a state now where it's all going to come out without a shadow of a doubt, it sounds as if she was still not necessarily fully aware of just how grave this situation was. And on his side, how could he ever imagine that Meghan wasn't going to become fully aware when they don't have a house to live in and their businesses have basically been evicted from the very place that they carry out the work. So it's clearly all about to come crashing down for Todt. And imagine the psychology of somebody like Todt. He likes to be in control. He likes to seem successful. He's got this perfect picture family that everybody seems to respect and admire, and yet it's all falling apart. The minds of some individuals, particularly those with, shall we say, some antisocial traits, they don't like the fact that they're going to be exposed to the people who love them and to the wider community. And this can be a real stress when these individuals start considering options that will maybe prevent those individuals that might choose, for example, to be angry with them or leave them. They think about ways of preventing that playing out in a negative context, even if that might be the most negative ramifications for the individuals closest to them. Bear in mind as well, at this point, his license to practice had also expired at the end of September that year, and he hadn't renewed it. So all he needed to do was renew that so he could carry on, but he didn't do that. And that's interesting. Why wouldn't you choose to renew something that's necessary for your work, unless potentially you're planning something that would mean you didn't need to renew it? Now we get to December the 29th, 2019, and at this point, Todt's sister, Chrissy, she hadn't basically been able to get in touch with him for quite a while. And this worried her because the last time she'd spoken to him, he'd said that they were all sick. So she's clearly concerned that they might have been dreadfully unwell and people can't answer the phone. So she then speaks to the police, says, can you just do a welfare check on my brother and his family? Which again demonstrates the care of the wider family about Todt and his family, which is just devastating, isn't it? Here we are in a situation where his own sister has concerns for his life and is going out of her way to make sure the police are checking on them. January the 10th, 2020, Chrissy ends up calling the police again. And again, this is because she's desperate for them to carry out a wellness check. She hasn't heard anything from them. Now, the police do call round at the house, but they couldn't make any contact with the family. Apparently, it looked like no one was home, so they left. Just going to throw it out there. That's why we ask you to do a welfare check. I mean, it's ludicrous, isn't it? Sorry, what do you want me to do? I'd like you to do a welfare check because I'm really worried that something might be wrong with my brother and his family. Okay, why would you like us to do that? Well, they might be dreadfully ill and require attention and you're the emergency services. That's a fair point. I'll go around now. Knock, knock, knock. Ooh, no one's answering. Ooh. Right, well, can't do that one then. See ya. I mean, that's ridiculous. Surely the whole premise of a wellness check is to make contacts. But no, they just go. Now, bear in mind, fortunately to some degree, FBI agents had begun to keep the Todt home under surveillance because we know they thought that the deception he'd been involved in ran deep. So they'd actually obtained a warrant for healthcare fraud, and at this point, they're trying to arrest Anthony Todt. But at this point, they'd also been unable to locate him. So they considered whether the family had moved away. They thought this could be a way of him trying to avoid the fraud charges. But then they realised on January the 13th, 2020, the family haven't left because the agents who were watching the house see Todt. First of all, he's sitting on the porch at the front of the home. Then he goes inside. So they call for backup. They approach the house and they tell Todt that they've got him surrounded. But even at this point, he doesn't come out. So agents obviously go inside. They want to arrest Todt for fraud. That's why they're there. Have literally no idea what is going to play out in front of their very eyes because they are there for essentially some kind of commercial fraud and robbery. But what they're going to walk into is a massacre. First thing they know when they go into that house is there's this really foul odour. Todt at this point comes down the stairs. Apparently he was shaking. He was barely able to stand. And he tells them at this point that his wife Meghan's asleep upstairs. Now, they start searching the house because nothing is adding up. And when they do that, they make this horrific discovery. In the master bedroom, they find the bodies of Meghan, 13-year-old Alex, 11-year-old Tyler, and 4-year-old Zoe, and also the body of Breezy, the dog. Todt's whole family had been killed. He was still alive, just his entire family had been annihilated. Meghan was on the bed, Alex and Tyler were on a mattress on the floor, and Zoe was lay at the foot of the bed. This is near Meghan's feet. Breezy was on the floor in the dog bed and the bodies were all in an advanced state of decomposition. The family had clearly been deceased for some time. They were all wrapped in blankets and the agents initially couldn't find Zoe because her body was so small and under a blanket. But Megan, Alec, and Tyler, it was obvious to the FBI investigators they'd been stabbed in the abdomen, but Zoe didn't have any visible wounds. Now, their autopsies would later say that the family died as a result of Benadryl overdoses and homicidal violence. It was estimated that the murders had taken place in late December. Now, Todt, he did have to be taken to the hospital. Apparently, he tried to kill himself by taking Benadryl. For those of you who don't know what Benadryl is, it's basically something that works as an antihistamine for allergies, but obviously in large quantities, like anything, it's toxic. He was then taken to prison because apparently he was making threatening comments, and he was later charged, understandably, with 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was also charged rightfully with 1 count of animal cruelty. Now, to all intents and purposes, the community expected that this was a family who were living the American dream, where everybody got on really well and where this kind of savagery just wouldn't play out. So it's a complete shock both to the community but also to the investigators themselves. Yes, of course, the investigators believed that he was definitely guilty of fraud, but the idea that this had potentially motivated him to murder 3 of his own family and the family dog, that is breathtakingly evil. Now, Todt is interviewed by the police, and during his questioning, he did admit to the murders. And he said that from April, basically, Megan had shown him videos about the afterlife and also about the world coming to an end. They then went ahead and researched more about this and ended up finding out about an apocalyptic event. And apparently during this apocalyptic event, families would be separated. This is bizarre, of course, because obviously this is something they're reading as if it's factual, apparently. Oh, I've come across a doomsday book and apparently the end of days is upon us. We must follow exactly what the directions are within this book. I mean, if that were the case, I would have been dead in the year 2000 because it was apparently all going to end then. Then they pushed it back to 2004. Just keep doing that, don't they? Now, it was decided at this point that apparently it would be better that they all stayed together. So they decided together that it would be better that they die before the apocalypse actually occurred, which is intriguing because he's still alive. He also said that this apparently appealed to Megan, so she was like super into it because she had this chronic pain, she had these really awful health issues, and apparently it appealed to him because he didn't want to be separated from his family. He wanted salvation and everlasting life. So just think about what he's saying there. Megan, well, she wanted it because she was a little bit on the selfish side. At the end of the day, she had all these health conditions, so it was appealing to her because she wouldn't be in pain anymore. But she didn't really care about the fact that she was going to also murder her children, apparently, whereas he was more, well, she'll benefit, she won't be ill anymore, and I'll be with my children because I'm a hero. So just think about the mindset he's peddling that, oh, well, she was somebody who was so poorly that it appealed to her. It appealed to her because she would no longer have to be in pain. She wouldn't have to endure the agony of her disease. And of course, the fact that she'd also be involved in murdering her children, that wouldn't bother her because she'd be out of chronic pain. Whereas I, as the father, I was like, I just want to be with my family. I'm not in pain, but I'm willing to sacrifice my life so that we're not separated. So even in that, he's basically painting Megan as the main problem. And he told the investigators that apparently they spoke to their children about it just before Thanksgiving and actually asked them how they'd feel if their parents died. And the kids surprisingly said that they wouldn't want to have them die at all, but certainly if that were to happen, they would want to die with them. As if a 4-year-old would just be having those kind of philosophical debates, you know? If you're not sat around the dinner table on a regular evening eating a meal with your 4-year-old toddler, basically suggesting to them, how would you feel about dying if we died? Would that be something you'd be interested in, or would you feel like you'd like to just independently live in this home without us? Maybe off the life insurance policies that you'll get. I mean, come on. That is not what you would do with your children. But apparently, after this conversation, they decided that ending their lives was something that they would do. And seeing as the kids didn't want to live without them, the decision was made that they'd all die together. He also told the investigators that he and Megan weren't violent people at all. So they were basically trying to think of ways that they could do it that wasn't apparently going to involve violence. Although murdering somebody, I would consider, is always considered pretty violent with respect to Todt. Apparently they thought about using cough medicine to make them all fall to sleep. Megan apparently made a pie with it in, but nothing happened after eating it. Then they tried to use Benadryl, but that didn't work either. So after that, they thought maybe we could just bleed to death. This is literally what he's telling the investigators. So let's just throw that out there for a minute. You don't want to use violence, but just essentially bloodletting to a point where none of you have any in your body and you die, that's not a problem, just the old bleeding out. It's not violent at all, is it? But apparently then they started to research the easiest place to stab kids so the kids would bleed to death. Not violent people, just researching how to stab our children to death. He also said that he wasn't entirely sure when the children died, but it was before Christmas. And it was also after the boys' music awards ceremony that had taken place on December the 14th. And on the night that they were killed, he'd basically set an alarm for 11:30 p.m. He and Megan then apparently got up. He went into Zoe's room first. This is a 4-year-old child. He said that Megan had led him to the door. So again, he's pitching Megan as the antagonist to some degree here. She's leading him to the door. What else could he do but go and murder his child? He said they apparently hugged and kissed, and she said to come and get her when he was done. So again, totally making her a co-conspirator. Todt said he then sat in Zoe's room for 2 to 3 hours because it was tough. So he's just looking at his child and thinking, I'm going to kill you, but this is really difficult, allegedly. But he also said, at the end of the day, my main motivation was I wanted her to have everlasting salvation and I needed to save her soul. Just going to throw it out there, Todt. I think that's what church is about. Just going, repenting for your sins, and you'll find that the big God is pretty cool with you. Also, kids are going to heaven because they've never done anything horrible. They're children. But again, he's painting a picture that he's trying to protect his children and offer them salvation, as opposed to painting himself as a family annihilator. He actually is. Now, apparently he went and sat with Megan after he's killed Zoe. And at this point, neither of them were deterred, apparently. They go to Alec and Tyler's shared bedroom. Alec was sleeping. Tyler was apparently downstairs that night because he was ill. And they discussed how Megan would hold his feet down and how Todt would be the one to inflict the stabbing. Alec apparently woke up after Todt stabbed him and he was fighting, he was rolling around and kicking, and I believe that would have absolutely been the case when his father tried to kill him. The idea that this child woke up to see the man that he thought loved him and would protect him at all costs was killing him. They're the very last images before that child shook off his mortal coil, his own father killing him. Then after Alec had died, Todt goes downstairs to the library, this is where Tyler was sleeping, and stabs him too. So none of the other murders has deterred him from carrying on this line of violence. It's not stopped him. He's just carried on. And that makes you think, because the vast majority of us, we would never be able to harm another human being, let alone kill a human being, let alone kill a child, the most vulnerable. And if you were to go through with that in a situation, for the most part, the horror that would be instilled within your nature because of your actions would be enormous. But to then go and repeat it, that's saying something about your nature and not a positive thing about your nature. It's not about salvation. It's that you're a stone cold killer. He also said that he tried to kill Tyler quickly because he knew that Tyler was the strongest and the fastest and he might have been able to get away. Oh, hang on a minute. Weren't you just telling us before that Tyler was totally invested in dying with you? He didn't want to live without you? Why would there have been a problem therefore? I mean, if he was totally bought into this idea of the whole family going off to another realm together, why would he have run away? What he's basically evidencing there is Tyler, of course, would have tried to get away because he wanted to live because he was a kid with a life ahead of him and didn't want the man who was meant to protect him stealing that from him. Then he suffocated Breezy the dog. So he goes ahead and murders the family pet. And the very fact, again, that he has no issue in even harming an animal that can't speak and give evidence about him. So he's not killing a witness that would have been a problem. Could have happily just let that dog out of the front door. But again, it's about territory. But there again, family annihilators kill because they see that people that they love, they have ownership over them. It's as simple as that. And reputationally, they don't like to be shown to be the fraud that they are. And that's one of the big motivations behind family annihilations. The person reputationally can't deal with the damage, so they kill the people who that damage would have the most impact on because it bothers them that they're shown to be the fraud they are. He then goes on to tell the investigators that he and Megan lay on the bed together and she said that she wanted to go next. So she stabbed herself and apparently she aimed for the inferior vena cava. Again, very specific, but after 45 minutes, she's still alive. And then apparently she's asking for liquid Benadryl. She kept drinking that. So yeah, she's basically now saying, oh, I'm in a situation where I've been bleeding out. I've also drugged myself with Benadryl, but I'm in a completely good state of mind to know exactly where to go through my liver. So that's apparently what she's saying. I'm going to go through my liver this time. And they were like, well, let's just take some time together because we can research where it's best to aim. And so they kind of do a bit of research and then they decide this is where the best aim is for the knife. And so she stabs herself at this point. Now, she also didn't die then. So Todt decides it's going to help her along, apparently, gets a pillow. And again, Meghan was requesting this. So she stabbed herself in the liver, she stabbed herself in the Mikana, and now she's actually demanding, even though she's drunk on Benadryl, to be suffocated. Because that's exactly how you'd imagine this kind of play out, wouldn't you? I mean, in that situation, I'm surprised that he didn't suggest that she wanted to be set on fire as well. It's ludicrous. I mean, it beggars belief that he's literally trying to paint this picture of this woman who has literally stabbed herself twice, also drunk something that's going to become toxic, and is now asking him to finally put her out of her misery. It's ludicrous. And the protracted amount of time that this is meant to have taken, again, makes no sense. He then said, after they were all dead, he moved their bodies to the master bedroom. And don't get me wrong, Todt's account was consistent with the injuries that were found on the victims, but of course they would be, because he inflicted them on the victims without a shadow of a doubt. Now, on January the 20th, the community have obviously heard about it at this point and they are devastated. So they all get together. They did this candlelight vigil in Colchester just to pay their respects to the family. And someone who actually used to babysit the Todt children said they were literally the most respectful, kind-hearted, sweet kids I've ever met. They were always well-mannered. They'd help whoever, whenever they could. And the whole community were devastated, especially because Anthony Todt had actually been considered to be a good person. He was an active member of the community. He'd been a member of the Colchester Business Association and the Colchester Soccer Club. Also, the New Haven Register, who spoke to members of the public who knew the family, said that no one had anything bad to say about Todt. In fact, one person said Todt was the last guy you would ever expect this thing to come from. Yes, maybe so, because people are chameleons. They can blend in and seem really nice, but beneath that mask is the monster who's sleeping. And when it's activated and comes forth, it is dangerous beyond belief. The reality is, he had been doing things very deceptively behind his wife's back for a very long time. He had no boundaries in committing fraud. He was somebody who was acting in a completely irresponsible way towards his family, but also in a highly illegal way. People wouldn't have expected that about him either. You don't expect that somebody's got the potential of being a family annihilator. That's why people marry them, because the reality is it's only when they act in that way you realise the darkness that has been within them. Now, in June 2020, Todt actually wrote a 27-page letter to his father in which he claimed that he was 10,000% innocent of all these preposterous charges. Just going to throw it out there, 10,000% doesn't exist, which is around the same level that your innocence doesn't exist with respect. He also went on to say about the fact that he didn't commit the murders and that he also didn't commit the healthcare fraud. He said Meghan was responsible for both. Meghan, the stay-at-home mother. It's not me, the business person who's been running the businesses, who's actually committed the fraud, even though I admitted that I actually did add all those hours on. No, it's not me. It's all Meghan. Conveniently, though, Meghan can't answer for that and to that because she's dead. But of course, she caused her own death. So really, I'm just saying I'm the innocent victim, and the person that you really want to arrest and imprison is unfortunately somebody that you'll have to exhume because she died. But how convenient that he is now projecting blame and reputational damage at Meghan, the devoted mother of his kids, an amazing human being, a kind woman, devoted mother, and now apparently somebody who is responsible for the annihilation of her children, and also the fraud that he was being charged with. As if the FBI would not be focusing on all avenues before they came to the conclusion that he was the one who was guilty. Clearly they knew they had their man in their sights. But this is just a very convenient way to try to avoid punishment. And this also demonstrates just how dark he is, because bear in mind, people were like, he could not do this. He's not the type of guy, he's such a nice man. Well, yeah, he's also an absolute fraud. He's a family annihilator. He's a dog killer. And then add to that, he's also somebody that when they are honed in on his guilt, he is willing to throw his dead wife under the bus to avoid any kind of responsibility, which means he has no remorse. You don't have remorse if you don't want to take accountability and culpability and responsibility for the crime you've committed. did. So he cares only about his own needs, which is also why he survived when everybody else in the family died. Now, in April 2022, the trial takes place and he unbelievably pleads not guilty. This is despite his original confession. But at this point now, he's had time to think about it, hasn't he? He denies killing his family. He claims that Meghan had killed his children and then she killed herself. He said, the other thing is, I've actually got no recollection of anything I said in my interview with the police. Oh, you have literally no idea of what you said? No, I've got no memory whatsoever. I don't remember the interview. I don't even know whether I was there. Was I even there? You were there. You're on tape. Was I? I don't have any memory of it at all. Yeah. During the interview, you were very clear about the fact that you were responsible for the killings of your children. You went into great detail, including exactly where the children were killed and how they were killed. Yeah, no, I don't remember any of that. That was the Benadryl talking, not me. It does sound like it was you talking. No, I'm just saying I have no idea whatsoever. No idea. It's just that you were very specific about the injuries. You literally labelled all the injuries and exactly where they were, and they're exactly where they were. Yeah, again, just coincidence. Sometimes when you're in a situation where you remember nothing, you say things that you don't remember that have absolutely no reference on reality. So I'm just saying I remember nothing. I kid you not. He said nothing, apparently. He actually admitted the murders in detail and linked everything to the autopsy that came out. But nonetheless, at this point, he says it's all BS. I didn't have any recollection of saying any of that, and therefore it doesn't count. He also then decides that the way to discuss with the court a reasoning behind why he'd said all this stuff that he apparently didn't remember was that he was just trying to protect the dignity of his wife and he wanted to take the blame for her. Again, as you would, I mean, when it comes down to it, your wife has murdered your 3 children, killed the family dog, and you sit there and go, you know what I need to do now is I just need to pretend it was me. Because they're dead and therefore none of them can go to prison for anything anyway. So I may as well give up the rest of my freedom and life just protecting her reputation. Even though throughout this whole situation, I seem to have been totally sullying her reputation. And even now I'm taking the stand and doing that in front of the world. Yes, apparently this was a heroic act on his part. He was just taking the blame for her. Now, what the defence argued was that Todt basically confessed when he'd overdosed on Benadryl and also when he was considering unaliving himself because of the fact he'd lost his family. But with respect, he hadn't, he was still breathing. So that defence doesn't really make that much sense whatsoever. It's probably more that he was just blanking himself out from the reality of his actions because one day somebody was going to find out and he'd have to come to terms with the horrendous individual he truly was. And like I said, the defence don't really have a defence, even though he's gone not guilty. Now the prosecution, stellar prosecution, and they of course argue that Todt murdered his wife, his children and the dog. Todt takes to the stand and boy, does he think that he can get away with it. I promise you there is an arrogance in this man that is unusual. During his testimony, Todt described Meghan as the light of his life, who still gave him butterflies when she walked into the room or when he saw her, straight out of a romantic movie. I mean, I wonder whether he was feeling that way when apparently they were discussing the demise of their children whilst reading apocalyptic books and figuring out that they were going to have to kill them all for their salvation. I wonder whether they were enjoying those butterflies at that point. No, they weren't, because he's making all of this up. The reality is he's murdered his wife. That doesn't suggest that she's giving him butterflies when she walks into the room. In Todt's latest version of events, because of course they changed quite a lot, this is the one that he gives in court, he said the night before the killings, he slept in his van. Yeah, the kids had played basketball with him and basically he thought, I'll just go and have a sleep in the van. Meghan went to bed early and he didn't want to wake her up. There's a whole house there. But because his wife, that he loves so much, who gives him butterflies every single day, because she's upstairs in bed, he thought to himself, I just won't enter the home at all. I'll just absolutely stay in the van. I don't want to wake her up. Apparently, he'd also planned to put together a bike for his daughter, Zoe, presumably a Christmas gift, because he's such a great dad, that was actually what he wanted to do. He wanted to do that at the condo nearby that they had, but instead he'd just fallen asleep in the van. I mean, if I'm not falling asleep in my car on a regular basis, I don't know what I'm doing. If I park up in my drive and then I put my head back for 5 minutes, it can be 3 days before I actually come round. I mean, that's how tired I am. Said nobody ever. But again, how ludicrous that he's painting this picture of the perfect husband, so concerned about his wife that he doesn't even go to his own bed for fear that he would wake her up. But again, this is trying to make it clear to the court that he wasn't even in the home the night the murders took place. He said he was woken up by the sunshine the next morning and then he walked home. When he goes into the house, he doesn't automatically check on the children. No, he begins to clean the kitchen because, again, what kind of a husband is he describing in this moment? The kind of husband that doesn't disturb the wife in bed. And then when he comes home, he's like, there's some dirty dishes. I must clean them immediately. Even though I've just had a really difficult night's sleep in a van and my neck's hurting. But this is the story he's telling. So he says, I noticed that my kids had eaten some sort of blueberry pie or pudding. Apparently there was an empty pie dish on the counter and there was also blueberry residue on plates at the kids' places at the table. He also noticed that the house was very quiet and he said that's not usual for my young children, but nevertheless goes ahead and apparently washes the pots up. So he cleans the kitchen, then he goes to the toilet. Then when he comes out of the bathroom, apparently at this point, he sees Megan stood at the top of the stairs and she says exactly what's happened to the children. Apparently she tells him that she'd stabbed them. He sees blood on her shirt. He then goes into Zoe's room, finds her on a mattress with a pillow over her face. He said that he knew she was dead, but it didn't look like she'd been stabbed. He then goes into Alec and Tyler's room and he finds Alec in his bed. He's laying on his back with a pillow over his head. There was also blood on his top and Tyler wasn't in their room, but Todt said he then found him in the library downstairs. He was laying on the couch, his hand was out to the side, there was a pillow over his head and there was blood on his top. He then said that he closed the eyes of all his children because they were apparently open. And he said he went room to room finding the kids. And as that was happening, Megan was just following him, apparently pleading with him to believe in what she was doing. He said she kept bringing up the story of Thomas the disbeliever. I imagine that he's referring at that point to doubting Thomas. That's the disciple who questioned that Jesus' resurrection happened until he was shown physical proof of the wounds from the cross. He also claimed that Megan had hidden the phones and their chargers so he couldn't contact anyone. I mean, just run to a car that you've got and drive somewhere. Try that. At the end of the day, have a search of the house. I mean, I don't imagine in the state that you're suggesting she's in, she's hidden them too effectively. Why not have a gander for them? Also, why are you not screaming bloody murder at this moment in point? Why are you not beside yourself? You've just found your children dead. With respect, if your partner had done that and you're the man in this situation, well, I would fear for your partner's life because you'd be wanting to do something awful to them because they've killed your kids. How bizarre is it that apparently he's just accepting this situation? He then went on to say that when he found out what had happened, so when he came home, when he found that his kids were dead, he said, I puked, I cried, I was in total denial of what happened, I couldn't understand. And then after that, I was like, I want to get you help. I'll take responsibility for this, just get help. That's all I wanted. I would do anything in my life for what she needed, provide for what she needed, provide her a happy life. I held my wife on a pedestal. I didn't care anything for myself. I wanted her to have a good life, period. And I wanted her to get help. Just with respect, that's BS because you spent loads of money that she was unaware of and you destabilised the family business and you were getting done for fraud. So you really weren't on her side whatsoever. The only side you were on was your own side. He did describe it as the worst day of his life, and one would imagine it should be because he literally killed his own children. He then claimed that Megan basically killed herself in front of him. He'd been in the ensuite to the master bedroom. He was looking for the phones. He'd also found his empty Benadryl bottle on the floor. He'd heard a sound that was like when he said, you rub a balloon. He came out of the bathroom and Megan's then lay on the back of their bed and she's stabbing herself in the abdomen with both hands on the knife. He then says to her, what the hell are you doing? And she said, what I did to the boys. I'm trying to get my inferior vena cava. I mean, is it just me who thinks that if you were in that state, you've killed your own children? This devoted mother, who's incredible, she's killed her own children. She's killed the family dog. And she's now in such a state because her husband's home and she's having to admit to this, that she absolutely wants her life to be over. And she uses technical language while stabbing herself. I mean, the distortion between where she would be mentally versus where she would be on a verbal level is ludicrous. Oh, I'm trying to get my inferior vena cava. She then asked him to leave her, and he said he was annoyed because he just wants to know where the phones are so he can get some help. This story is so obviously bullshit that it's actually painful to listen to him in court. And the prosecution, well, what can I say? They had about as much time for him as you or I would. It's quite clear that the prosecution absolutely know it's all BS, but it's very difficult to imagine that he would even go into court and tell this story, because I guarantee everybody in that courtroom is just blindsided by how delusional he is, that somehow he can pull the wool over the eyes so that people are going to believe him. Just think about this. He's telling a story where she stabbed herself once. Now, bear in mind, she'd be in great pain from that. She's not going to lie there stabbing a knife into herself whilst also holding a coherent conversation at the same time using technical phrases about her physiology. He's then asked what he did after Megan died. He said he condemned himself to death. Well, you didn't, did you? Because you sat in court, mate.
What do you do after Megan dies?
Like I said, I yell out the front window of our bedroom for anybody. Help, 202, please. I don't know where the phones are. I hear some kind of weird breathing, some kind of weird air exchange, something. No heartbeat. They never went over that in CPR class. But you know what? I was trying anything. So I started CPR chest compressions. And when I didn't see her breathing, I would do mouth compressions. I didn't care about the blood. I didn't care about all that.
What do you do after this?
At what point are you referencing?
What do you do the rest of the day? It's the morning. What do you do the rest of the day?
I literally broke down there and cried. Don't ask me how long, because I have no idea how long. I was in a state of confusion. I was in a state of whatever. I couldn't help my wife pass. I felt a failure. I wasn't there the night my kids were died. I felt a failure. I decided that I wanted to be with my family, that I wanted to die, that I deserved to die. I condemned myself to death. I was ashamed.
What did you do?
I sat there and cried for a while. At some point that I realized now, after seeing the receipt up there, I decided I was going to go and get a gun. At some point, as the receipt said, on 12/18, I went and purchased that first pellet gun. After I inquired of purchasing a gun to find out that there's a 3-day rule in Florida. I've never purchased a gun before. I purchased that gun, which was a pellet gun, that I was planning to give my kids, my boys, a Christmas present with. I left and came back.
What kind of gun were you trying to buy?
Any gun they would sell me.
Did you try and buy a shotgun?
No, I tried to buy, I was trying to buy handguns. I inquired with them. I didn't inquire on a specific model. I said, I've never bought a gun before. How do I go about buying a gun?
And apparently he'd then gone to try to purchase a gun. Ironic, because let's be clear, much faster death if you actually get a gun and shoot yourself, isn't it, if you get it right? He was also asked whether he had ideas of joining his family in the afterlife, and he said, after I saw everybody die, after I saw my wife die, saw my kids, most definitely I wanted to be with them. That's the only thing I wanted to be. I didn't care by what means. I sliced my wrist. I took multiple doses of Benadryl. I tried to hang myself several times. I bought a pellet gun to shoot myself. Interesting. He also said he tried to kill himself at least 10 times, but he chickened out from using a knife. Just have that happen to your wife and your kids, the knife, but you didn't want that for yourself, probably because you saw the absolute agony it inflicted and the horror and terror it inflicted, and therefore you had that stained into your conscience. That's why you didn't use a knife, because you used a knife on them and it was harrowing to witness. But that didn't stop you from stabbing others in your family, just from stabbing yourself.
Did you have ideas of joining your family in the afterlife?
After I saw everybody die, after I saw my wife die and saw my kids, most definitely. I wanted to be with them. That's the only thing I wanted to be. I didn't care by what means. I didn't care by what anything. I sliced my wrist. I took multiple doses of Benadryl. I tried to hang myself several times. I bought a pellet gun to shoot myself because I couldn't get a gun to, as you call it, eat a gun.
Did you ever try to poison yourself?
With Benadryl, yes. And also, I was just under recently of medical care and I was given metformin for diabetes. And at one point, I swallowed the whole bottle of metformin.
Now, obviously, all his attempts failed, and he actually described to the court that he was frustrated that he couldn't go through with it. He said that on the morning of the murders, Megan had woken up pain-free and everything was good. I mean, why would she choose that day then? He also claimed that he found a note that was suggesting she didn't want to be here anymore. It was in her pants pocket. It said that we did it as a family, and he said the note ended with, "Tony, I love you forever. Please forgive me." So he's even suggesting that while she wanted to take the children with her, she didn't want him to die. He said he actually found the note after one of his attempts when he woke up in the garage. How convenient. So finds this note that says that she doesn't want him to die, and he actually takes the note out of his, quote, urine-soaked pants and retyped it because I wanted my leftover family that was alive to keep the knowledge that we were a family unit, and I wanted my wife's wishes known, where she wanted the ashes buried, that she wanted to be buried with her father, and where we released the ashes. So he wants to basically let everyone see that she was completely invested in this plan and that she has these wishes ultimately to go through. Now, whilst on the stand, Todt really does find it difficult to hold his composure at times. He becomes visibly annoyed if the prosecution raises an objection or interrupts something that he's saying, because of course he's crafted this narrative and he wants to say it and he wants to convince people that everybody's got it wrong and he's innocent. Now, on a few occasions, he did become choked up. He did become quite emotional when he was talking about his wife's health in particular. But let's just say it seems incredibly forced and he switches it off really quickly and really easily. He comes across as highly unlikable. I have watched so many trials, and sometimes you literally watch killers testify and lie, and you almost feel bad for them. And at times it introduces some doubt as to whether they actually committed the crime. You know, you might find yourself thinking, oh, I don't know whether this person is guilty. Not in this case. In this case, he does not seem credible at all. You don't believe him and you don't warm to him in any way, shape or form. He just comes across as highly dislikable.
It was malfunctioning, to put it lightly. Her eyes were at one point the color of the most fluorescent yellow highlighter you ever seen in your life. I swear her eyes could...
Mr. Todt?
Yes.
Did there come a time then at that occasion when she had the hepatitis that it affected her lifestyle or what she could do?
Most definitely. My wife, she was a yoga teacher in addition to physical therapist. She went from a very strong, vibrant woman to barely holding on to 90 pounds. She couldn't keep weight on. She couldn't breathe. Her heart rate progressively was going crazy. Their rest too would be 190 or above. EKGs, all that kind of stuff, saw her throwing atrial fibrillations, PVCs, which are, it's basically your heart operates in a synchronous motion, okay? Valves pump on rhythm. Her valves and her, sorry, not valves, her chambers were beating all irregular. It was basically, you take four wheels of a car.
Objection, lack of medical knowledge. And narrative.
It's a narrative system.
Mr. Todt, have you, what medical training have you received in conjunction with the physical therapy?
I appreciate you asking me that, sir. 20 years of medical experience working in a hospital, case review charts, home care, meaning that not only was I operating under a nurse or with a nurse individually at a house, I was also opening cases on my own, which means I received medical information, medical records from the doctors and from the hospital themselves to be interpreted, to be reviewed, and to be deciphered so that I can properly give the appropriate care within their medical limits to the patient.
He looks agitated and he doesn't like the fact that he's had to stop talking because that happens quite a few times when he's interrupted. You know, he wants it to be seen that he's emotional when he's talking about his wife's health, but it just doesn't wash because, like I said, he seems annoyed when people interrupt. It also seems really outraged when they question his lack of medical knowledge. I actually laugh at his reaction because he just can't believe they are questioning his superior knowledge. He's also so argumentative when he's cross-examined. I mean, you can see the rage bubbling inside him when the prosecution doesn't allow him to answer every question with these long, rambling, unnecessary rants, and they cut him short on more than one occasion. He says, "Allow me to elaborate," and of course he's told no. It baffles me that he clearly thinks that he is believable when actually he is completely unbelievable, and his emotionless testimony sways the jury in a direction he wouldn't want. He's a complete narcissist, it goes without saying. And even though he's apparently getting emotional when he's talking about his wife's ailments, which are very forced and fake, he speaks of his children and their murders with an absolute level of detachment. In fact, what really stays with me in this case is he seems smug and argumentative, and that is a very bold route to take when you consider the circumstances that are being tried in this case. You won't be surprised, Todt was found guilty of murder, and rightfully so. He was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, thank the Lord, because this kind of person is narcissistic and dangerous at the highest level. The judge actually added an extra year onto the sentence for animal cruelty just to represent Breezy. And you can see that he's quite surprised, shaking his head when each of the guilty verdicts are read out. He would be the only person in court surprised by this.
State of Florida versus Anthony John Todt. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Verdict as to count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Verdict as to count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of cruelty to animals. So say we all, dated at Kissimmee, Osceola, Florida, Osceola County, Florida, on the 14th of April, 2020.
And I think that often when you watch a person be found guilty who claims innocence, you see the defense rub their shoulder or do something to try to comfort or reassure their client. That does not happen in this case. Deep down, it's clear his own defense knew the right verdict had been reached. And all Todt did throughout his trial was refuse to take responsibility, blame his own victims, and try to wallow in self-pity. The judge actually said that after listening to the evidence presented, the jury decided that you, Anthony John Todt, are a destroyer of worlds. I do actually find it really interesting that in both versions of his account of the murders, he says Megan killed herself. The jury didn't believe that. Even in his original version, where he's actually admitting to murdering the kids, he does say Megan stabbed herself. I don't believe that she did. I don't, especially in the way he's described it. But I do think to some degree it's strange that he admitted the other murders in his first interview but not hers. I guess that's because he wants them both to be seen as if they were involved in the killings and that she was a willing participant in her own demise. So basically suggesting that, yes, she did stab herself and yes, he eventually suffocated her, but she wanted that to happen. She was pleading with him for that to happen. And that just tries to tell a story to others that she was a co-conspirator in it, even though we know that's not true. It's very insulting, in my opinion, to Megan's memory that he would, first of all, make out that she was happy to stab herself after being involved in the killings of her children, but then he changes his story and ultimately makes her out to be the murderer, the woman who killed her own kids, behind his back, that he wasn't even involved. Now, understandably, like I said, the community were devastated by the loss of this family, and in a tribute to Meghan, it was written that she, by her family, said, she always treated others with kindness and patience. She could light up a room with a brilliant smile. Most of all, Meghan's life was defined by the love she held so strongly for her children. Her entire being was encompassed in her motherhood, and she did whatever she could to support her family. Meghan will always be remembered as having an exciting zest for life and learning, and for giving her children that same enthusiastic curiosity for the world around them. Alec was described as exceptionally bright and gifted. His memorial actually reads, with striking blue eyes, Alec had a quiet confidence about him. He excelled in his schoolwork, especially English and history. He was an avid reader and particularly was interested in World War I and military history. He loved to learn from his great-grandpa Max and grandpa Bud all about their military experiences. A gifted musician, Alec played the piano and was learning how to play the violin. He loved to play soccer as the goalkeeper and to ride bikes and skateboard with his brother Tyler. Tyler John Todt enjoyed making others laugh. His memorial calls him the comedic relief, saying he was so quick to joke and play around, but his carefree nature always carried a concern for others. He often wanted to know how he could help someone who needed something. Like his brother, Tyler was also intellectually gifted, excelled in mathematics. He was an accomplished piano player and was learning folk guitar. A hard-working competitor, Tyler loved to play soccer with his brother, and they went swimming any chance they had. Zoe, the baby of the family, she was considered sassy and cheeky. Apparently, she could easily light up a room. Her memorial reads, Zoe was full of life and was known to everyone as Princess Zoe. Her beautiful blonde curly hair framed a face that was always laughing and smiling and singing. Zoe loved her time at the school and being part of the Montessori Academy of Celebration community. Zoe treasured any moment she got to dance and sing, and she was eager to start her ballet lessons. She also had a musical spirit. She wasn't shy about playing her harmonica all around the house. And of course, with two older brothers, she naturally developed a strong personality. When Alec and Tyler went head to head, she was never shy to put her hands on her hips and tell them authoritatively, now my boys, stop. Her brothers, like everyone in the family, thought the world of Zoe and would do anything in the world to see her happy and smiling. It went on to read, Meghan and her children were beautiful, talented and passionate about life. They were all devoted to each other and lifted their family to aspire to greater accomplishments so that they could compassionately help others. They will be forever loved and greatly missed, and their adored family and friends will never let them be forgotten. It's devastating, isn't it? To know that this family, who were literally adored by so many people, were wiped out because of a man's selfishness. That's what it comes down to. There are different reasons for family annihilation, familicide, but actually one of the big motivators is financial ruin. When the male in the family causes the family issues financially, they hate the reputational impact. And instead of just confronting that reality, they wipe out the people who would be most affected. It's easier to kill them than to come to terms with the reality of their own actions. And the selfishness, egocentricity, and narcissism within that choice is mind-boggling. 3 children, a family dog, and an amazing woman, amazing mother, murdered because he didn't want to come to terms with facing the truth that he wasn't a businessman, he was a con artist. And finally, his time was up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Are you like me, absolutely convinced that she had nothing to do with any of the killings, that she was absolutely a victim and she wouldn't have wanted any of this to play out, and that he did this for his own selfish aims? Or do you think that there's some truth in what he suggested, that she was involved, at least initially? Like I said, I firmly believe that's untrue, but as ever, I welcome every single one of your comments and read all of them. Look after yourselves, guys. Be safe.